Hi everyone, how's it going, and welcome back to another Sky Sports Fantasy Football video. Today we're looking at the best transfer structure, which I believe is the best way to manage your transfers well over the season and leave yourself with enough towards the end of the season to make good gains and just steadily on keep a good transfer count and keep the points going. So if you watched the last video, you'll know I'm currently out of the country and pre-recording a couple of videos just to get out this week. So this should come out in the weekend at some point, either Saturday or Sunday. But yeah, so next week we will be back to regular uploads, and obviously Premier League starts this week. I think it should be when this video comes out. So I want to try get some game week previews out and lots of different videos for you guys anyways. So last year I made my own transfer structure and it went quite well for the first half of the season, and then I started to get a lot of injuries and a lot of 3-for-1s and stuff started cropping up, and I went way over the budget. I ended up about 5 or 6 transfers over, and then paid for that at the end of the season, having to reduce back on some transfers. But this structure here again should just be a good baseline. Obviously it doesn't have to be stuck to perfectly, otherwise you're going to end up missing out on a lot of things, but it's a good way just to gauge how many transfers you can use for the first few weeks and for different points within the season. So here we are then with the transfer planner. Hopefully this is fairly understandable, and as you can see we have the 50 transfers planned out here in a nice little table. So let's get straight into things. Let's start explaining it. Game week 1, obviously no transfers to be used there. I think if you're using transfers in game week 1 that's not for an injury, you've probably done something wrong. Obviously we can't help injuries in game week 1, so if that happens, it happens. Some of us need to make a transfer, but game week 2 is where the transfers start off. As you can see, there's a blank in game week 5, and you could have a wee section in there between 2 and 4 of how many transfers you want to use. Personally, I like to keep it a bit more open for myself, and I've used the transfers up to game week 9. Now, a lot of the fixtures change in game week 8. A lot of people have a big fixture swing. Teams that had harder fixtures then have good fixtures after game week 8. So game week 8 would have been my cut-off, but obviously game week 10 is a blank game week, so there's no point in starting to use more transfers in game week 9 when there may be an international break or whatever that blank is for. So first 9 game weeks we have 10 transfers to use, which is more than one transfer a week, so it should be plenty for us to use. And again, that's about halfway through the first half of the season, using up 10 transfers. And again, I think the way most of us are setting up our teams for the first few games, we really shouldn't be using too many transfers anyways. And then game week 10 we have the blank again, and then the further blank comes in game week 15. So in between that we have 4 game weeks where I've allowed myself 4 transfers, which again equals to 1 per week. And that would be 14 transfers used in the first 15 game weeks, which again I think is fair. I think 1 transfer a week is plenty. You're not going to be making transfers every week anyways, so that lets you use 2 or 3 in some weeks. And then we've got game week 16 all the way up to game week 21 before the overhaul. So this is the Christmas period. 6 transfers between 5 game weeks. Game week 21 is left blank because I don't think it would be a great idea to use your transfers up 1 week before the overhaul comes. You could say use the same argument for game week 20 as well, but this is during the Christmas period, so there may be a few fixture gains to be made there with everyone playing lots of different games. Now last year at this point I think I had about 29 transfers used, which meant I'd used 21 by Christmas, which was actually a lot less than a lot of people had. A lot of people had only used maybe 12 or 13 at that point, but obviously the World Cup was last year, so the cut-off point was about 2-3 weeks earlier. So I think 20 transfers to use in the first half of the season is very good, because there's not as many fixture gains to be had as there is at the end of the season. That's why I like to keep 20 for the first half and 30 for the second half. And I think 6 transfers should be enough. Hopefully if you can save some before that. You maybe have a little bit more than 6 transfers, but as I say, if you need to use an extra 1 or 2 during the Christmas period, it's not going to be the end of the world. But I think 6 transfers is plenty, and then we get to the overhaul using 20 transfers. Now after the overhaul we have one game week, which is game week 23, and then we're straight into another blank, so I don't really think you're going to be wanting to use any transfers in there, especially after the overhaul anyway. Everyone's going to be setting their team up for a couple of weeks in advance, so there really should be no reason to use any transfers in game week 23. And then we've got 30 transfers to use from game week 25 all the way up to the end of the season. And it splits itself up nicely. We have, 8 game weeks for 15 transfers, then another blank, and then it's 8 game weeks again for 15 more transfers, which equals out to roughly 2 a week, which is absolutely plenty. And I think you're going to be using them quite a lot, especially with the Club World Cup this year, which I think is in about February. With Man City playing in there, you're probably going to want to get the City players out. And there's going to be, I think AFCON might be this year as well, so a lot of players are going to be off to that. Again, more transfers to be used, so even if you've got a bit more than 30, I think it'll be very good. I think it's going to be very useful, as we saw this year, to use a lot of your transfers at the end of the season with so many different fixture gains to be had. So that wraps things up then for the transfer structure. Again, another shorter video, but as I say, things will be back to normal next week with more and more videos and the Premier League season starting. But hopefully this transfer structure gives you a decent idea of a good way to gauge how many transfers to use over the season. Obviously yours doesn't have to be exactly like this. You can just kind of move it about as much as you want. And you can use more transfers, etc. in different places. But this is what I've went for, and it worked for me for the most part last season when I tried it. And yeah, it was my first season using a proper structure due to the increase in transfers from 40 up to 50 last year. But yeah, so if you enjoyed, please leave a like. If this helped you out, please let me know in the comments, and subscribe as well, and I'll see you all in the next video.